all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we're going to be covering a case from California. So let's just get started, shall we? Cary Anthony Stayner was born on August 12, 1961, to parents Delbert and Kay Stayner in Merced, California. He had 3 sisters and a brother, Cindy, Jody, Corey, and Stephen. Growing up, Cary loved the woods. Delbert was a mechanic who worked at multiple canneries during the harvest season, and Kay ran a daycare business and worked as a lunch lady at multiple high schools. During the summer, Delbert and Kay prioritized family trips, often in the form of camping trips, to many of the national parks, especially Yosemite, due to its closeness to their home. Kay had attended a Roman Catholic boarding school as a child, where she was physically and emotionally abused. In the end, turning to the Mormon faith, and while she adhered to it, she reported that her childhood left her physically unable to be affectionate to her own children. And it sounds like here, Delbert picked up the slack. Unfortunately, it went too far, and he was accused of molesting one of his daughters. At age 3, Cary was diagnosed with trichotillomania, or compulsively pulling out his hair. It is an impose control disorder. By age 7, he began to fantasize about killing the checkout clerks at the grocery store. In early 1972, Cary was sexually assaulted by his uncle Jesse Stayner, and multiple sources report that the family knew about Jesse's sexual proclivities, but even extended family allowed their boys to be taken to his house for overnight trips. So we're off to just a wonderful start here. In December of 1972, Stephen was abducted by Kenneth Parnell, a convicted pedophile. Kenneth convinced Stephen to get into his vehicle while asking if his mother may donate to charity. He then took Stephen to a rented cabin at Yosemite Lodge where Kenneth was working at the time. Stephen was then told his parents signed him over to Kenneth to call him dad and brutally attacked him almost nightly for years. While his parents grieved, Delbert dove into paranoia. He carried a sawed-off shotgun in his truck in case he saw someone with his son. The family wouldn't be reunited until February 14th of 1980, when Kenneth abducted a new 5-year-old. When Kenneth went to work, Stephen grabbed up the boy and the pair hitchhiked until they made it to Ukiah Police Station. When Stephen made it home, he was touted as a hero. His parents turned all their attention to the now 14-year-old to take care of him, make up for lost time, and unintentionally neglected the rest of the children in the household. As such, Cary faded into the background. Then, shortly after his return home, Stephen was dead, killed in a hit and run while on a motorcycle. Cary still managed to do well in school. He got good grades and played on the high school baseball team. In his youth, Cary wanted to be an artist, drawing cartoons, but as time went on, he let that dream fade away. While he seemed normal on the surface, friends reported that the whole family was kind of quote-unquote off. They knew there was something, but nobody seemed to be able to place it. For Cary, by 16, he was accused of touching the breasts of a neighbor girl during a sleepover his sister had with the girl. Afterwards, he exposed himself to her. A cousin, Kathy Amy, reported that he would peep into the bathroom windows when the girls were known to be in there. She stated, quote, "You always knew he was somewhere, always watching," end quote. On the other side, Cary enjoyed still being out in the woods, hunting, fishing, swimming, and camping. He claimed to see Bigfoot out in Yosemite, turning it into an obsession. There, Kathy stated, quote, "He absolutely knew that it existed. You couldn't have told him anything different," end quote. In 1990, Cary moved in with Jesse. Yes, that Uncle Jesse. Anyway, Jesse taught him how to install windows and windshields, hiring him and his company, CNS Glass. So it sounds like here nothing else happened, but maybe at this time Cary was outside of Jesse's window of what he liked. Anyway, around Christmas, Jesse came home early to find someone in the middle of a breaking and entering. By the time Cary came home, Jesse was dead in the doorway after being shot. The case remained unsolved, and yes, Cary was investigated, but had a solid alibi as he was at work, with multiple witnesses that could testify to such. From there, Cary took a job with Merced Glass and Mirror. Michael Marchese, a friend and coworker, reported that he once found Cary in the middle of a psychotic episode, slamming his fist against plywood, repeatedly causing blood to go everywhere. Cary stated he didn't know why he felt like this, but, quote, he said he felt like getting in his truck, driving into the office, and killing everyone in there and torching the place, end quote. Naturally, Michael informed their boss, who in turn drove Michael to a Merced psychiatric center. The therapist recommended group therapy, but of course, Cary declined. Instead, he picked up his last paycheck from work and headed out. He got a job as a handyman at Cedar Lodge in El Portal, west of Yosemite National Park. Cary rented a room above the diner, working seasonally at the lodge. On February 14th, 1999, 42-year-old Carol Sund and her 15-year-old daughter Julie, along with their 16-year-old exchange student Silvina Poloso, checked into Cedar Lodge. They had driven from the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, which is approximately 122 miles away. After checking into the lodge, the trio went sightseeing, going to Yosemite's Grand Le Capitan and the Merced River Gorge, and even ice skating in the Yosemite Valley's Curry Village. Francis Carrington, Julie's father, spoke to them on the phone that day at some point during their time out and stated, quote, "The girls were happy. They were having the time of their lives," end quote. All of them went to dinner at the Cedar Lodge restaurant, rented a Jerry Maguire movie, and then went to their room, number 509. Karen called her husband, Jens, to confirm they would meet at the San Francisco airport the next day. After San Francisco, all of them were going to travel together to Arizona to see Jen's sister and show Silvina the Grand Canyon. It sounds like they were really trying to make this exchange student's stay wonderful, making several experiences and memories of seeing the area. At 11 p.m., there was a knock on their door, and a man, who identified himself as the handyman, reported a leak upstairs and wanted to make sure it hadn't affected their room. At first, Carol declined to let him in, reporting there was no leak, but Cary's insistence finally wore her down, and Cary went into the bathroom to check after being let in. After about a minute, he returned, gun in hand. He proceeded to bind and gag the three. After they were bound, the two young girls were carried into the bathroom. He returned to Carol and strangled her with a rope. Then he drug her body to the trunk of the rented Pontiac of Carol's and returned to the room for the younger girls. Cary cut their clothes off and tried to get them to perform sex acts on each other, but Silvina just wouldn't stop crying. So he strangled her right there in the bathtub. Then he raped Julie in the motel and the room next door. But he suffered from erectile dysfunction, and so he struggled to keep an erection while attacking her. After he finished, he put Silvina in the trunk with Carol, packed their belongings, and even wet towels to make it look like they had simply showered and left. At 4 a.m., he carried Julie naked and wrapped in a hotel blanket to the Pontiac. He drove along Merced River Canyon, turning off at Lake Don Pedro, where he raped Julie again, and then he slit her throat. Cary hid Julie in some brush and drove the car as far as he could into the forest, then took a cab back to Yosemite Valley. The trio didn't arrive at the airport as planned the next day, but Jens reported that Carol was so spot on with everything that he actually thought that he messed up and was supposed to meet them in Phoenix. So he drove there. But when there was still nothing, Jens called the rental car company to find out that the car hadn't been returned or extended by Carol. The next call was to the lodge and was told that they had checked out without leaving their key at the front desk. From there, Jens called the park rangers and police to report the three girls missing. Around the same time, Cary returned to his crime scene and lit the Pontiac on fire in order to remove any physical evidence. A widespread search of the area was conducted by rangers. Police processed the girls' hotel room, discovering a pink blanket and pillowcase was missing. The key was left on the dresser and a bag of souvenirs had been left behind. As the search continued, 27 stolen cars were found, but none were Carol's rental. Part of Carol's wallet was found on a back road near Modesto, planted by Cary to ensure they focused on the wrong area. And it worked. When the FBI came in to assist, the wallet had everyone focusing on the Modesto area instead of the hotel room, which seemed to be too clean to be a crime scene. Jen's and Carol's parents, Francis and Carol Carrington, came out to Modesto and set up shop in a hotel room at the Modesto Holiday Inn to complete their own investigation. The staff at Cedar Lodge were questioned, and all of them, including one Cary Stayner, were cleared as suspects. Approximately a month after the women disappeared, a hiker found the burnt-out vehicle, and it was identified, it sounds like, by its partial license plate. Investigators opened the trunk and found 2 women. DNA confirmed that the remains were those of Carol and Sylvina. Police reported that based on the dump site of the car, the killer likely had to know the area well. And Cary realized the car had been found, but not Julie. And so he actually wrote a letter along with a map to her body, writing, quote, "We had so much fun with this one," end quote, in an attempt to convince authorities there was more than one perpetrator involved. On the letter, police pulled a partial fingerprint and from the envelope sealed DNA. Unfortunately, it was of Hispanic origin, as Cary had paid someone $5 to spit into a cup for him, obviously using that saliva to seal the envelope, again in an attempt to throw off investigators. But still, no new leads came in, and investigators did the only thing they could think of. They arrested 4 men on separate violations, ones that might potentially be able to be these murderers. With blind faith, one of them was certainly the killer. They arrested Michael Larwick, a meth user in jail after shooting a police officer. Eugene Dykes, arrested for sex and weapons crimes. Billy Joe Strange, on parole, arrested with alcohol on his breath. And Daryl Gray Stevens, with a 1978 conviction for rape and robbery. He was arrested for failing to register as a sex offender. As the FBI believed one of these men had to be the perpetrator, they of course announced it in June, stating, quote, "We have all of the main players in jail, but we are in no rush to charge them," end quote. Because there was no evidence, because clearly, unfortunately, it wasn't them, and their mistake leads to another death. Because then, Cary met 26-year-old Jolie Ruth Armstrong. Joy worked at Yosemite Institute teaching children about nature. Joy had a fiancé, Michael Raffelli, and the couple lived with another friend at Yosemite National Park. As the FBI had informed everyone that the killers were likely caught, Joy felt safe. In mid-July, Michael went on a 3-day hiking trip, and her roommate actually left to go out on business. So she was alone. Joy made plans to go to Sausalito and visit friends, then travel on to San Francisco to see her grandmother. Unfortunately, she never made it to see her friends, and out of concern, they called police on July 22nd. After being unable to get a hold of her, they asked for a welfare check. Park rangers found her truck parked and ready, with a door partially open, a very ominous sign. As he stepped in the door, he heard music playing, and immediately it sent him on alert, and he called for backup. Officer Hopkins said, quote, "Right from the beginning, we have broken sunglasses on the porch, a tipped-over watering can, and in one of the bedrooms, the furniture is askew, and the bed was a mess," end quote. Outside, they found mismatched tire tracks, footprints, and broken branches indicated where someone had started trekking. The police followed the trail and found Joy within a few hours. She was partially submerged in a drainage ditch in jeans and a white t-shirt, but her head was missing. Cary had gone to Fresta to find Bigfoot. Instead, he ran into Joy, and after determining she was all alone, he pulled a gun on her. He ordered her inside the cabin, then bound and gagged her with duct tape. When she was bound, he pushed her into his own vehicle, a 1979 International Scout. As they drove, Joy dove out of the vehicle's open window and took off running as fast as she could. Unfortunately, Cary was fit and fast, catching up to her and tackling her. He dragged her further into the woods where she continued to fight. She bit him and scratched at him, and that's when he took out his knife and slit her throat. Joy attempted to block the cut by keeping her chin to her chest. Cary then had to put his foot on her head, and he cut again. Joy continued to struggle for minutes before succumbing to blood loss. He tried to cover his tracks, but their fight was messy, as was her death, and the blood made it difficult. Out of frustration, he went back to Joy and decapitated her, tossing her head into the creek. Then he drove away, but his Scout broke down miles short of the lodge, forcing him to catch a ride with, wouldn't you imagine it, a passing park ranger. And for some reason, I can't imagine that he didn't have blood on him, but nobody seemed to notice. Police investigated her murder, and immediately someone reported seeing a 1979 International Scout at her house the night she was killed. On July 22nd, it was found by two rangers 12 miles from the entrance of the park on the shoulder alongside California 140. As rangers came up to the riverbank, they found Cary sunning himself, naked, and smoking weed. Cary told them that he was a handyman at Cedar Lodge and was brought in for questioning, though he denied ever being at Joy's neighborhood. Still, at that time, they didn't have enough evidence to hold him, so they unfortunately had to let him go. They did go to his apartment on the 23rd and spoke to him again. This time, they took photographs of his tire treads on his Scout, and the same day, Cary sold his TV, VCR, stereo, and some CDs, telling his coworkers he needed cash to get his vehicle fixed up for a potential move. The FBI was working in the background, matching the photographs of his tire treads to those found at the scene. And the next day, Cary was a no-show at work. The FBI searched his apartment and found evidence linking him to all of the murders. Cary, for his part, was at Laguna del Sol, outside of Sacramento. It was a site of about 150 acres where anyone could kind of pitch a tent and relax. And it sounds like here it was a clothing optional location. He drank and talked to a woman named Janet Dammit, who recognized him from a previous visit he had had there in March. Janet and he talked about the murders, but he basically said he needed to leave because the police were in the area and just were too much for him, which she seemed to sympathize with. He talked about going north to Oregon or Utah. The next morning, Janet watched the news only to hear the anchor announce that the FBI was looking for a one Cary Stayner. She immediately called the number on the screen and let them know where Cary was, posted up in his tent. After she got off the phone with police, she also let the resort manager know the situation, and the manager sent out a groundskeeper to tend the area of the bushes. This was in order to stay near his tent and kind of keep an eye on him. Cary did get up for breakfast, and while sitting at his table, he was joined by 3 FBI agents and was taken without incident. Jeff Reinick was one of the agents who escorted him back to FBI headquarters. At this time, Cary wasn't officially under arrest, but was brought in for questioning. And I cannot find why he wasn't immediately arrested if they were already linking him via the evidence in his room at Yosemite, but I'm guessing that the pieces kind of meshed up at the same time. On the way in, Jeff realized that he recognized the Stayner name, and he and Cary ended up speaking about his brother's abduction. After all, it was in the same area. They developed a rapport, and when they arrived at the station, they ordered a pizza since Cary missed breakfast. The FBI photographer, Steve Grube, was quoted as saying, quote, "Somebody asked me if I thought he did it, and I said, nah, this guy couldn't be it. This guy's too nice a guy." End quote. The pizza and polygraph administrator ended up showing up at the same time, and so Jeff asked him, "What would you rather do first?" Cary reported that he wanted to skip the polygraph, and instead, he actually wanted to speak to Jeff about something. When they were alone, Cary started eating his pizza, and when he was finished, he began his confession. He even said that he originally planned to kill his own girlfriend and her 2 daughters, who were 11 and 18, the day after Valentine's Day, but chickened out when a caretaker ended up showing up to the property where they lived. He went back to the lodge, and the next day, that's when he saw the 3 women who checked into a remote part of the hotel and essentially decided he couldn't help himself. Then he spoke about going out to find Bigfoot and ended up seeing Joy, that he was angry at her for fighting so hard, and that is why he cut her head off. He spoke about mailing the map and the note to find Julie and using someone else's saliva to the seal of the letter because he watched crime shows and he knew that there was DNA evidence there. Everyone who knew Cary expressed their shock and disbelief that he could possibly be the murderer. He was touted as a quiet but friendly guy by many who interacted with him. After he confessed to the FBI, Cary did an interview with San Jose TV reporter Ted Rollins, ignoring a gag order he had. Cary immediately opened up to him as well, telling Ted the details of the horrific crimes he committed. Ted stated, quote, he said because of the voices in his head and thoughts in his head the past 30 years, he couldn't help himself. So he acted again and killed Joy Armstrong last week, end quote. Ted asked Cary if he would have kept killing if he had not been caught, and Cary nodded his head, stating, quote, definitely. I would have killed until I was either caught or killed myself, end quote. In February of 2000, the U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno approved the decision to put Cary Stayner on death row if convicted of Joy Armstrong's murder. As this was on state park land, it made it under the authority of the federal government. The federal trial, therefore, was set for October, but Cary ended up taking a plea agreement in order to spare his own life under the conditions by the prosecution that he admitted guilt and never spoke about the murder of Joy Armstrong again. On December 13, 2000, Cary went to court and officially pleaded guilty to the murder of Joy Armstrong, apologizing to her mother and fiancé. The second trial for the murders of Carol, Julie, and Sylvina, Cary actually pleaded not guilty. Of course, defense went with not guilty by reason of insanity. Defense brought up his OCD tendencies that he fantasized about hurting women from age 7. One psychiatrist stated, quote, he lives in a quasi-magical reality, which involves Bigfoot and premonitions about the end of the world, end quote. The prosecution brought out the word serial killer, that he knew what he was doing. They played his recorded confession and shared all the details, including showing photos of Julie when she was found partially decomposed and in a 6-inch wound in her neck. On August 26, 2002, Cary was found guilty of first-degree murder, and on September 17th, sentencing began, and the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before deciding Cary was sane during the murders and moved on to his actual sentencing part. In the end, he received death. As of this time, Cary Stayner remains in San Quentin, California. While California doesn't carry out the death sentence at this time, he remains part of death row and will die there, likely naturally at this point. And that is the end of Cary Stayner, and many of people call him the Yosemite National Park Killer. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.